The most painful feelings are the quiet ones. The quiet feelings never announce themselves. They do not arrive with tears that demand attention or words that beg to be heard. They sit gently in the chest, like a weight you slowly forget you are carrying until one day you try to breathe deeply and realize you cannot. This is how it began for Daniel, not with heartbreak loud enough for the world to notice, but with a silence so complete that even he did not recognize it at first. Daniel was the kind of man people described as fine. When asked how he was doing, he smiled easily and said, "I'm good," with such consistency that no one thought to question it. He woke up early, went to work on time, laughed at the right moments, paid his bills, and called his mother every Sunday evening. From the outside, his life looked orderly, even admirable. Inside, however, there was a growing space where something unnamed lived, a feeling that did not scream, did not cry, but simply stayed. It started after the end of his relationship with Clara, though even calling it an end felt inaccurate. There had been no dramatic breakup, no slammed doors or final arguments. They had simply drifted apart, like two people floating on calm water in opposite directions, neither noticing the distance until it was too wide to cross. When Clara finally said, "I think we're holding on out of habit," Daniel had nodded. He agreed because it sounded logical, mature. What he did not say was that habits were sometimes the only things keeping people alive. After Clara left, Daniel did not collapse. He did not drink excessively or isolate himself completely. He cleaned the apartment, reorganized his bookshelf, and even started cooking proper meals again. Friends praised him for handling it so well. "You're strong," they said, and Daniel accepted the compliment, not realizing that strength was becoming another quiet burden he had to carry. At night, when the world slowed down and the noise of responsibility faded, the quiet feelings became louder, not loud enough to be heard, but heavy enough to be felt. He would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying ordinary moments with Clara, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, how she always read the last page of a book first, the sound of her laughter when she forgot to be careful. These memories did not stab him with pain. They pressed down gently, persistently, until sleep finally arrived out of exhaustion rather than peace. Daniel never talked about this part. How could he? There was no clear story to tell. People understood anger, grief, betrayal. But how do you explain a feeling that is mostly absence? How do you say, "I miss something I never fully appreciated until it was gone," without sounding ungrateful or dramatic? So he stayed quiet, and the feeling stayed with him. At work, Daniel was efficient and dependable. He worked as an editor at a small publishing firm, spending his days fixing sentences, correcting grammar, smoothing out other people's thoughts. There was something comforting about making language clearer, about giving structure to chaos. Yet, even there, the quiet feeling followed him. Sometimes he would read a paragraph describing love or loss, and a strange ache would settle in his chest, not sharp enough to interrupt him, but strong enough to slow him down. His colleagues noticed that Daniel had become more reserved, but no one worried. Reserved people were easy to overlook. They did not cause problems, did not demand attention. They existed in the background, reliable, and calm. During lunch breaks, Daniel listened more than he spoke. He nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected, and returned to his desk feeling strangely invisible even to himself. On weekends, Daniel visited his father, who lived alone in a quiet house at the edge of the city. His mother had passed away years ago, leaving behind a silence that his father never quite filled. They sat together, watching television without really watching it, sharing meals with minimal conversation. Daniel saw something familiar in his father's eyes, a kind of settled loneliness that did not ask for rescue. It frightened him, not because it was dramatic, but because it looked permanent. "Are you happy?" his father asked one evening, without looking away from the screen. Daniel paused. The question was simple, but the answer was not. "I'm okay," he said finally. His father nodded as if that was enough. Maybe it was. Or maybe they were both fluent in the same quiet language, one where deeper truths remained unspoken, because speaking them would change nothing. As months passed, Daniel noticed how the quiet feelings shaped his behavior. He stopped reaching out first. He replied to messages, but rarely initiated conversations. He told himself he was just busy, just tired. In reality, he was afraid. Afraid of wanting something he could not name. Afraid of hoping for a connection that might not last. It felt safer to remain still, to let life pass him gently rather than risk being shaken again. Then one day, while browsing a second-hand bookstore, Daniel met Leah. She was standing in the poetry section, holding a worn paperback as if it were fragile. When Daniel reached for a book on the same shelf, their hands brushed briefly. It was nothing, an accident lasting. Less than a second, but something about it startled him. Not excitement exactly, but awareness. A reminder that he was still capable of feeling something. "Sorry," Leah said softly. "It's okay," Daniel replied, equally soft. They exchanged a polite smile and turned back to the books. Daniel told himself that was the end of it. But minutes later, he noticed Leah was still there, flipping through pages slowly, as if she was not in a hurry to decide. Without thinking too much, Daniel spoke again. "That one's good," he said, gesturing toward the book she was holding. Quiet but honest. Leah looked up, surprised, then smiled. "That's exactly why I like it." They talked for a while, about books, about the strange comfort of old paper, about how some words feel heavier than others. The conversation was easy, unforced. Daniel did not feel the need to impress her or hide parts of himself. He simply existed, and that felt rare. They began meeting occasionally, coffee after work, walks through the city on Sunday afternoons. Nothing moved quickly. They did not rush to define what they were doing, and that suited Daniel. With Leah, silence was not uncomfortable. They could sit together without talking, sharing the same space without pressure. It was different from the silence he carried inside. This one felt shared, almost gentle. Still, Daniel did not tell her about the quiet feelings. He listened to her stories, laughed at her jokes, learned her habits. He liked the way she noticed small things, the way she paused before answering questions that mattered. Being with her made the quiet feelings recede slightly, like a shadow at the edge of the room. But they never disappeared completely. One evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the lights come on across the city, Leah asked, "Do you ever feel like you're holding something in, even when everything seems fine?" Daniel's chest tightened. He stared ahead, watching people pass by, each carrying their own invisible weights. Yes, he said slowly, all the time. Leah nodded. Me too. That was all she said. She did not ask him to explain, did not try to fix it, and somehow that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't felt in years. As their connection deepened, Daniel faced a quiet fear. What if he lost this too? The thought did not come as panic, but as a dull ache. He realized that the most painful feelings were not the ones that followed loss, but the ones that anticipated it, the silent calculations, the unspoken worries. Loving someone quietly meant risking pain quietly as well. One night, Daniel lay awake, listening to the steady sound of Leah's breathing beside him. The room was dark, peaceful. He felt the familiar weight in his chest, heavier now, because it had something to protect. He wanted to tell her everything, to confess his fears, his silences, the way he sometimes felt empty without knowing why. But the words stayed inside, unformed. He understood then that quiet feelings were not always signs of weakness. Sometimes they were the result of carrying too much alone for too long. Sometimes they were love that had nowhere to go, grief that had never been given a voice, hope that was afraid of being disappointed. In the months that followed, Daniel began to change, not suddenly, not dramatically, but in small, deliberate ways. He spoke a little more honestly when asked how he was doing. He allowed himself to say, "I'm not sure," instead of always, "I'm fine." He wrote again, filling pages with thoughts he never intended to show anyone. He learned that naming a feeling did not make it louder. It made it lighter. One evening, sitting across from Leah in the same bookstore where they had first met, Daniel finally spoke the words he had been carrying. "I'm not very good at showing how I feel," he said. "Most of the time, the hardest things for me are the quiet ones." Leah reached across the table and took his hand. "You don't have to be loud," she said. "You just have to be honest." Daniel felt something loosen inside him. Not a sudden relief, but a slow release. Like a breath he had been holding for years. He realized that quiet feelings did not have to remain hidden forever. They could be shared carefully, patiently, with someone willing to listen. Life did not become perfect after that. Daniel still had days when the silence felt heavy, when old memories resurfaced, when fear whispered that nothing lasted forever. But now, those feelings did not live entirely in the dark. They had been acknowledged, and that made all the difference. In the end, Daniel understood something essential. The most painful feelings are the quiet ones, not because they are weak, but because they are patient. They wait to be recognized, and when they finally are, they do not demand drama or attention. They simply ask to be felt, understood, and gently held. And sometimes that is enough to heal.